Andrew McCarthy, here up in Bayman. I've got company in the background, but they've been instructed to be quiet on the set. So, here we are. This morning, I cooked a feed of capelin. Now, I don't know how appetizing that looks, and perhaps, well, I know not many 12-year-olds, hey Briz, are going to even consider a meal of capelin. But it reminded me of Newfoundland's, well, let's say, our new position in the culinary world, right? Because of late, I mean, I couldn't believe it when I first moved home from Vancouver, and all of a sudden Newfoundland had become the darling of the foodie community. I'm like, for real? You haven't eaten at my mother-in-law's, right? And it wasn't until I got home, after spending so many years away, that I started to recognize just what it was that made Newfoundland so unique. Because from a foodie perspective, you got to remember, the foodie world has exploded, right? We've come a long way from Wok with Yan, right? Remember that little hour special was so funny coming out of Vancouver? Well, today we have entire television channels dedicated to food. We have magazines. There is so much focus on food that basically to be able to create content, they're always looking for unique cultural fairs, we'll say. And of course, in Newfoundland, we have so many unique varieties in our diet and in our offerings for those who are visiting and those who care to investigate. If you're looking for content, you can't beat Newfoundland. Now, let's not kid ourselves, guys. As I often like to remind people, it's not that we're so terribly creative. I think Cabot said it best when he talked about a dear friend of ours who talked about agriculture in Newfoundland. Because in Newfoundland, we don't have great soil, right? We really don't. We don't have a great growing season. He said our agriculture was born out of necessity, and it died in poverty. Right? The same can be said for a lot of our foods, especially when it comes to our fish. Right? And you have to remember that in Newfoundland, right, we have all of these wonderful dishes that are all, for the most part, associated with cod. Right? And the reason that we refer to cod as fish, because really it was the only fish that was available. Remember, I've told you before, there's only 14 indigenous species of mammals in Newfoundland. Right? There's no freshwater fish here. We don't have pike, we don't have pickerel, we don't have bass, we don't have any of these freshwater species that you see on the mainland, because during the last ice age, all of the lands, all of the soils, all of the plants and the bushes, all of the freshwater fish, and many of the mammals were completely erased. They were scraped off of the face of the island. So the only fish that was really available to us was codfish. And of course, there's only so many times, no matter what. I mean, like, and don't get me wrong, cod is the most versatile fish in the world. Think about how many different recipes there are throughout all of Europe for bacalao. That's what bacalao is. It's salted cod. And whether you're in France, if you're in Spain, Portugal, the Basque Country, even in England, right? There are so many different recipes for bacalao. They had so many interesting infusions, right, with all of their wonderful fruits and all of their wonderful, well, let's say even spices, but, you know, when you have herbs and all of these wonderful things, like whether it's olives or tomatoes or all of these things that we didn't have in Newfoundland, they were able to create a number of infusions. In Newfoundland, right, given the fact that fish was our dietary staple, it was our main source of protein. Remember, only 14 indigenous species of mammals, that's what we had. There's only so many days in a row your mother can get away with serving fish, right? Can you imagine everybody's reaction? Imagine the children, oh, Mom, not fish again. And your mother would say, oh no, honey, we're not having fish this evening. We're having tongues, right? Oh no, we're not having fish this evening. We're having britches. We're having sounds. We're having nape, right? We had so many different cuts that nobody else in the world would have seen, because all we were sending to the rest of the world for our export purposes was the actual flesh, right? It was the fillets, it was the salted fish. But with all of these different, unique varieties and cuts, we were able to create some variety in our diet. Now, of course, when I say there's no other fish in Newfoundland, we had salmon, right? Salmon didn't keep very well. That was the challenge with salmon. We would salt salmon, and I can remember people, the salted salmon would last so long. We weren't big in smoking. Again, remember, there wasn't a whole lot of Aboriginal influence here, so we weren't really accustomed to smoking any kind of meats or protein. So we would salt the salmon the same as we would our codfish. And the challenge with salmon is that it's so oily, right? The salt couldn't preserve it as effectively as it would for the codfish. And as a result, the salmon would get what we would call, my grandfather would say, that salmon's that's gone rusty, that is, right? And that was, of course, when, it didn't keep. Capelin, on the other hand, which, as far as I know, I may be mistaken, but I think it's a member of the salmonic family. It's a small little fish, very similar to a smelt. It lives in the salt water. It doesn't come to the fresh water, but it makes a very similar attempt as the salmon. Salmon swim into our rivers to lay their eggs. That's where they spawn. Well, the capelin does the same thing, only it doesn't swim into the rivers. It lands on our beaches, and it lays the roe on the beaches. This week, we had an opportunity to try the capelin. A friend of ours, again, Cabot Martin, brought these along. We had a wonderful feed, and this morning, I did them in we didn't have a whole lot available here. We had some bacon, we had some butter, and we actually had some old Ritz crackers that we ground up, and that's how we rolled them into it. A unique dish, perhaps the likes of which Jeremy Charles or my sister-in-law, Laurie McCarthy from Cod Sounds would approve. Guys, the next time you're eating a dish in Newfoundland, the next time you're thinking about a different foodie opportunity, perhaps you might want to consider Newfoundland, whether it's on a trip that's here or just picking out your local cookbook. And a big shout out to Laurie because she has a new cookbook that's about to become available. Guys, I'm Andrew McCarthy. I'm the Urban Bayman. I hope you're enjoying these videos. I hope you subscribe to our channel and have an opportunity to try capelin, or one of the many wonderful dishes that we have available here on this island. Thanks.